Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the press conference about annual results of the European Investment Bank Group. Thank you for coming here today. We have here the president of the EIB Group, Werner Hoyer, and to his left, the Deputy Secretary General, Mariot Santoni, and the Secretary General, Klaus Trümmel. What we will do is we'll have some introduction remarks by the President, and then we'll go into Q&A. I'm Matteo Maggiore, I'm the Head of Communications, by the way. President. Okay.
Thank you very much, Matteo. Ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year. We are aware that 2015 was a difficult year for Europe, and we are in the midst of deep difficulties in Europe. And some people are believing that the integration process is at risk. We are strongly committed to this integration process, and therefore we will continue to give support to the idea behind this integration process of the European Union. And although 2015 was a difficult year for the European Union, and we are still in a crisis, on behalf of the EU Bank, I can say 2015 was a very good year. Crises, even the most acute, bring opportunities as well. The bank made a sizable positive difference. We delivered on ambitious commitments ahead of time and beyond target. And we strengthened our engagement in the most difficult areas of Europe and the globe. We started work on another hugely ambitious program with the Investment Plan for Europe, which President Juncker and myself launched in November 2014 with speeches in the European Parliament. And we ensured it was well on track even before the structures that underpin it were in place. I think we should remind ourselves that this start is only 14 months ago. And for European standards, the delivery time for the legislation and regulation was record short. This was not easy, and I maintain that no one could have done more or could have done it quicker. Let's speak first about the impact, because as a bank, we are used to hammering out the figures, the volumes of the activities we undertake. What is important is what kind of impact does that produce. The impact of our lending on the daily lives of Europe is how we measure our success. The EIB is the EU bank, and our ultimate responsibility is to respond to the economic needs of each and every European citizen in every country of the EU. Our loans help create and sustain the jobs of 4.1 million people. SMEs, mid-caps. These are good jobs, lasting jobs, mostly in innovative projects. That's our main target area. That's as it should be. What Europe needs today is innovation, innovation, and more innovation in order to close the innovation gap about which I talked now for 2 or 3 years, next to the investment gap. These two things go together. We have looked closely at our continent's competitiveness gap, and it is clear that the greatest impact can only come from the development of cutting-edge approaches and technologies. So I'm very proud that total EIB loan volume to innovation was 18.7 billion euros in 2015. We supported R&D of over 50 private sector companies. In 2015, climate change took center stage in international affairs. As the opportunities linked to a greener economy become apparent, here too, the EU Bank makes a big difference. The projects we signed last year alone will support 2,828 megawatts of new electricity generation capacity, of which 94% from renewable energy, from wind farms to solar power, geothermal facilities, and biomass plants. That is enough to power 2.34 million homes of European citizens. And inside those European homes, our loans will help to install 13 million smart meters, which is a development that is gaining speed all across Europe. These innovative devices allow consumers to see in real time how much electricity and gas they use and how much it will cost them. The meters reduce waste and help cut energy bills. We finance new urban infrastructure that will benefit 3.2 million people in Europe. We funded the refurbishment of new buildings of over 185,000 units of social or affordable housing. And it's easy to see that there is also a link to the refugees question. We've funded our investment in environmental infrastructure also had enormous impacts, providing 20 million people with new or improved water and sanitation services. EIB loans are providing direct benefits to 1.45 million students in education facilities around Europe, schools and universities, providing opportunities for young people and fostering research. When public spending has been particularly tight, we financed health facilities for 9.8 million citizens in Europe. In real terms, last year, GDP increased, and we expect it to continue to grow, but many regions of Europe still do not feel like thriving places. Since the financial crisis of 2008, the EIB's response has been strong and invaluable. Our lending has been far higher than in the early decades of the bank's existence. The bank has embarked on a path of change and modernization, and it has produced real results. In 2015, EIB group financing, that is the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund together, totaled 84.5 billion euros. That's up 4 billion to 2014. The EIB alone lent 77.5 billion euros, supporting 462 projects in 68 countries around the world, catalyzing almost 230 billion euros of investment. The European Investment Fund, which we operate together with the European Commission, we are the majority shareholder. The Commission is the strongest minority shareholders, plus a few others from around Europe, which focuses on small and mid-sized businesses, signed 204 deals in 2015 with a value of 7 billion euros. That is more than double the amount of business the EIF did in 2014, another measure how the EIB group responded to Europe's economic needs. Crucially, the volume of investment by others that is catalyzed by those EIF deals stands at 26.9 billion euros. Here is how our lending breaks down across our key priority areas. Infrastructure, 18.9 billion. Environment, 19.6. Innovation and skills, 18.7. And the SMEs and mid-caps, 29.2. At the beginning of the existence of the bank, nobody would have thought that we would be so active in the field of SMEs. But there is obviously a market gap in Europe when it comes to financing, when it comes to access to finance for smallest of the small companies and for mid-caps. And this is why the intervention of a public bank is justified. And we always have to ask ourselves, is it justified that a public institution intervenes in the market? Yes, it is, if there is such an obvious market failure. So it is a great time of great change for the European Investment Bank. New challenges have been presented to us. To handle them, we have evolved. In the spirit of Victor Hugo, who said, "Change your leaves, keep your roots." This has had some resonance for the EIB in 2015. The best way for us to face the challenges of implementing the investment plan for Europe, for example, has been to take our existing expertise and use it to develop new approaches. Just because we had the ones who had invested early in Skype and Shazam does not mean we stop building bridges and train connections. In 2012, our shareholders the EU member states agreed to a capital increase for the group. In turn, they expected us to lend an additional 60 billion euros and to support more than 180 billion euros of overall additional investment. Not only did we succeed in that, but we exceeded the target and finished the job early. The period that was given to us to deliver ended on the 31st of December 2015. We stated already in April 2015 that at the end of March, 180 billion euro mark had been reached, 9 months ahead of schedule. In addition to this, over the same period, the 27 months of the capital increase, our so-called normal lending, the regular business of the bank, supported 335 billion euros of investment. That is one of the reasons that we were able to start with confidence to deliver on the promise of the European Fund for Strategic Investments, the guarantee facilities established with the Juncker plan. EU governments, the European Parliament, the European Commission, all these and other voices across Europe made it clear that they expected the EIB to act rapidly. So we started work on the investment plan, and we did not wait for FC structures to be formally set up. You will remember that after the regulation was done, June, July, we had the selection of the steering board before the summer recess. We had then the selection and the approval of the new managing director of FC by the European Parliament in October. Mr. Molterer, the new managing director, is with us. So if you might have questions afterwards, he will be available. And the investment committee, this is the committee that decides about the availability of a budget guarantee of the European Union for projects having been selected by the bank, was in place a few weeks ago. They will formally start their concrete work at the end of this month. So we did not wait for these institutional setups to be completed. We began immediately. And for that time, the Commission acted as steward for the guarantee. This allowed us to launch the first investment under the plan already last April. By the end of 2015, the EIB group approved well over 100 investment plan loans and guarantees. Resources committed totaled 7.5 billion euros, 5.7 from the bank and 1.8 from the fund. The value of the projects and the investment mobilized in total comes up to 50 billion euros. This is 16% of the overall objective of the 315 billion euros over 3 years, which are at the core of the Juncker plan. The remaining objective needs are ambitious. A few weeks ago, Mr. Molterer was appointed, and FC structures will now manage the EU budget guarantee. But of course, the work on the project themselves will continue to be done within the structures of the bank. I mentioned how profoundly the EIB group has adapted its working in response to the change. We plan to continue launching new products and tools in the course of the year to ensure FC stays on track and achieves maximum impacts. As far as 2015 is concerned, I'm convinced that no one else could have done so much so fast. FC is already making its presence felt in 22 EU member states, and the others will follow very quickly. However, it is crucial to remember, or to remind, that the investment plan for Europe is more than just FC. Higher risk investments will only make a difference if the other aspects of the investment plan for Europe also succeed. Strengthened advisory services through the European Investment Advisory Hub are critical for more innovative projects to attract funding. EIB Group and the European Commission launched the hub in September, and we already engaged with requests from 21 EU member states. Of course, this is not as visible as concrete projects are already, but the work on the advisory hub is in full swing. But what we also need is regulatory reforms and the completion of the internal market to make Europe truly investment friendly. Europe's problem is not cash, but a weakness, a proper market failure in the risk-taking. And we can only cure this by removing regulatory redundancy and fragmentation of the internal market, currently the most powerful deterrents to investments. And we fully support the activities of Vice President Timmermans in this respect. We have a genuine expertise in identifying these barriers to investment, and we are contributing in providing our expertise to those who can actually remove these barriers. The FC deals signed so far by EIB are in precisely the kinds of activities and sectors the investment plan for Europe aims to bolster. Half of them are in the renewable energy, energy efficiency, or low carbon and environmental sectors. The others include digital infrastructure, R&D, and industrial innovation. Small and medium-sized businesses are already benefiting from FC. Our fund has already signed 84 operations with a total financing of 1.8 billion euros. This will trigger more than 25 billion euros of investment in 81,000 small and medium-sized businesses across the European Union. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the investment plan for Europe is one of the most exciting things the EIB group has ever been involved with, and one of the most important projects for Europe today. But we have our regular business to be done as well. The work, or that work, is the bedrock upon which the investment arm of the investment plan is built. When I look over the list of deals we did in the last year, I'm struck by its range, its focus on innovation, and by its power to stimulate investment. As well as guarantee and securitization activities, the European Investment Fund plays a leading role in the European equity investment space and in venture capital, which sustains many innovative young companies around Europe. Yes, one can say the leading role. The Innofin initiative continues to break new ground. Just to mention one aspect, its infectious diseases finance facility funds the early, risky stages of vaccines, treatments, and medical devices. Last summer, the facility's first loan of 10 million euros was to a Swedish mid-tech firm, which is developing a novel viral load test for HIV that works outside clean rooms and thus ensures that patients in developing countries can be diagnosed and treated correctly and early. There are 35 million people living with HIV all around the world. This is an investment which has real impact on the survival in particular cases, and as this test is able to detect all HIV subtypes. Our work in education is something of which I'm particularly proud. School children in Helsinki or in Croydon study in new buildings and with the latest educational technology thanks to loans from EIB. And in 2015, it was our privilege to be associated with a massive program of modernization for Italian schools. These are investments in our young people. They are also investments in Europe's future as a center of innovation. Now, Europe's future must be innovative. It must also be green. The EIB is the world's biggest provider of climate finance. We have financed more climate action than the next 5 biggest multilateral development banks together. Over the next 5 years, we will provide around 100 billion euros for climate-related projects. 100 billion euros for climate-related projects. We will help turn the ambitious agreement approved in Paris at COP21 into reality. In particular, we stand by a pledge made with all multilateral development banks to work together to raise the private finance that will be needed. And I can say we have been the avant-garde among the multilateral development banks in this context, both when it came to the social development, the sustainable development goals in New York at the United Nations last year, and first in Lima and then in Paris when it came to COP21. Public finance alone will never be enough to tackle climate change. And we would say the same thing about the new challenges that go along with migration. All the challenges that go along with the sustainable development goals. We need to mobilize private financing. As the largest multilateral development bank, EIB Group recognizes its special responsibility to do more what it does best: catalyze private investment for climate action and sustainable development. We have that experience. We are the crowding in bank. We have committed to make at least a quarter of our loans to climate action projects. In 2015, we met that commitment. In fact, climate accounted for nearly 27% of our global financing and 31% in developing countries. On top of this, we pledged to increase lending for climate action projects to 35% of the loans we make in the most vulnerable countries by 2020. Well, if you are the biggest multilateral lender in the world, and you do not tap national or EU budgets in order to be able to do that, you do not put the burden on the taxpayer, then you have to get the money from somewhere. This somewhere is the international capital markets, and there, I must admit, we are also by far the largest supranational borrower in the world. We mobilize resources on capital markets worldwide, and close to 40% of these funds come from countries outside of Europe. Simulating cross-border capital flows for projects serving the EU is at the heart of what EIB does. But borrowing is also a key area for our climate action. Also there, EIB has been the pioneer. We pioneered the green bond market in 2007 with the first climate awareness bonds. The proceeds of these bonds are earmarked for lending to renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. Since then, the EU Bank has issued over 11 billion euros in green bonds, with 4 billion raised in 2015 alone, making the bank not only the first, but also the largest issuer of green bonds in the world. Other issuers have now joined in to create a worldwide market in which a record 40 billion euros of bonds were issued in 2015. This is very important because green bonds have the potential to make a significant impact in scaling up climate finance. In 2015, we were reminded many times that Europe is not removed from the worst of what the world can do. We have responded swiftly to the refugees crisis. We are already financing projects in countries of destination, for example, for emergency refugee housing. We're also taking care of countries of transit and of origin, because we were aware from the very first moment that once we have managed to bear the brunt of the refugees' challenges in our home countries in the European Union, and we have hopefully be helpful in mastering the challenges in the countries of transition, we will be asked, aren't you curing the symptoms only? What are you going to do about the causes of migration? And these causes of migration are not only causes which have to do with war and peace, like in Syria, where we cannot do that much directly. But there are many causes for migration which will haunt us in the next couple of years. And that will require a new, resolved approach, economically, strategically oriented development policies, and we are part of that exercise as well. The EIB's response has been forceful in the countries bordering Syria. In Jordan, for example, the bank signed a 51 million euro deal in November to finance a water pipeline that will supply the north of the country. The arrival of Syrian refugees has created intense pressure on Jordan's scant water supply. It has also the potential to cause conflict between the refugees and the existing citizens. And projects like this pipeline will alleviate such pressures. By bolstering frontier countries, we reduce the impetus for refugees to move on and seek asylum in Europe. We give them a choice to remain closer to home and build new lives there. The EIB is the EU bank, and most of its activity naturally focuses on Europe, but our reach, our impact is global. Indeed, I would like to see the EIB group to do more outside Europe in support of EU foreign, development, security, trade, and environmental and climate policies. Whether on security, climate, or energy, we are dealing with global challenges in a global world, and we have big tasks ahead of us. Largely as a result of EFSI, lending in higher risk activities will rise from 6% of all loans to 30%. This requires intensive work with financial vehicles and many new clients. So broadening the client base is another big challenge for us in the next years. I'm confident that the EIB bank's ability to handle these big tasks is big enough. Remember, while we were ramping up our lending in Greece, And we are present in the phase of strongly bolstering our activities in Greece again, with the even partial departure of our organizational setup in the bank. And the exposure of the bank in Greece is now equivalent to 10% of the GDP of the country. At the same time, we have been giving additional support to Ukraine, where we had been expected by the European Council to double our business 2 years ago, which we did and which we are doing presently. But in addition to that, we were available and active when a new challenge for the Ukrainian citizens came up, when it became obvious that the gas supplies for Ukraine would not be sufficient to get over a potentially very cold winter. Well, this bank is not able to finance gas supplies. This is not in the remit or in the statutes on the legal basis of this treaty-based institution. But we were creative enough to think about a cooperation with other multilateral institutions who might be able to do exactly that. And the World Bank was exactly able to do that. But in order to be able to do that, they had to get some relief on their balance sheet. So we came up with a deal with the World Bank. We took over investment projects from the balance sheet of the World Bank via guarantee, put them basically on our balance sheet. And that enabled the World Bank to make sure that the heating systems in Ukraine do not go out at the end of January. So this is another example for the fast, speedy, and creative activity of the bank in times of need. While all this was going on, of course, we concentrated on the preliminary phase of EFSI and mobilized 16% of the target of 350 billion even before the governance was fully in place. We are confronting major challenges and we're doing it successfully. In recent years, the EIB group's role in helping Europe develop and deploy responses to local and global challenges has grown steadily. For example, of course, we were immediately available for support and advice to our friends in the United Kingdom when the huge floods came there over Christmas, and we are going to see how this further develops. We are ready to be of assistance in order to mitigate the huge impact on the peoples in the United Kingdom and in Ireland. The need for our lending and expertise will grow still more in the years ahead. We recognize the responsibility that comes with this role, and we won't let Europeans down. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take your questions now. I will be assisted by the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General because they know much more about the details of our work than the President does. And if afterwards you might have questions on more detailed issues, most of the Vice Presidents are here, most of the Directors General are here, and the Head of the Advisory Services, the Head of the Investment Fund is here. So we'll be able to, I think, to respond to all of your questions, hopefully in a satisfactory manner. Thank you very much for your interest.